probably is a misconception that they think they just go home and are overly obsessive and they don't actually think about themselves. Whereas, you know more than anyone else, as a happy athlete is a fast athlete.
100%. Like, it's easy to say happy athletes successful or whatnot, but if you're happy, you're going to perform better in life.
Welcome back to the Human or Athlete podcast with this week's guests, Chris O'Donnell and Joe Fuggle. Chris is a 400 metre Irish runner with the third quickest 400 metres ever run by an Irishman, as well as being part of the team, the first Irish team to run in an Olympic final. Joe joins us once again after being part of the Morgan Lake episode. He's the founder of the Athlete Place and was a former Team GB runner himself. This episode was a really good one on a couple main ideas. One being really about the idea of support. Joe obviously talking brilliantly about it with the Athlete Place and its connection to supporting athletes, but also Chris sharing different stories as to when he, for example, needed support and he didn't realize he did, and the impact of how much that helped him, and the impact of support and supporting athletes, and obviously having families and people around you, if it isn't families, to support the athlete, making such a big impact to reaching the levels you want to reach. And as well as that, looking at how we're all different. We all have different mechanisms, methods, different approaches to life and sport. And it's about figuring out what's best for you and taking some ownership, maybe some more individuality in how you approach that into your body, your mind, your energy, into where you put everything, and working out what's best for you. It doesn't have to follow what the environment says or what necessarily your idols might do. And it's like, I'm going to figure out in my own strength, in my own authenticity, what works for me and sticking by that. And that sometimes is a brilliant recipe to balance performance as well as well-being. And that's all it's about. Can you be the best athlete without sacrificing your mental health, your physical health, or anything else? Make sure to check us out at Human or Athlete on all our social media, as well as check out our website, humanorathlete.com. Enjoy the episode. Chris, we'll jump in straight away. What's the most important thing to be a successful athlete?
Like, people talk about the training, the diet, the nutrition. I think they're the first things that people will think about when you just perform in sports, but it is your mental state as well. Like, you can do all the training, the great training, but if you're not in the right place mentally going into competition day or whatever it is, then for me that's certainly the most important thing. You're going to be switched on. If your mental state is right, you're going to be able to deal with the ups, deal with the downs as well. And I think for me, that's the most important thing I have to say.
What is the right mental state?
Like, in sport, it's not all going to be plain sailing. We've all had our fair share of ups and downs over the years, and I think having that steady state. So I try not to get too down after my defeats, and then when you have the high, not try to get overboard with that either. So that's kind of the mentality that I have going into my competitions, and always trust the process. Very cliche, but for me, I do, and I write down all my training over the years. I've logged every single session that I do in the diary, maybe every night, or at least at the very end of the week I'll write what I do and stuff like that, just to look back on and know mentally that this is all in the bank, and now it's just about getting my mind in the right place, believing in what I've done over the years. And when you turn up on the day, then it's you can't do anything else. You just have to get your mind in the right place, and then I believe that's once I've done that, then I've given myself the best chance.
Why do you write everything down?
It just, so stuff like that, it could be the night before a big race. You think about this, that, so certainly I'd open the book, look back, and I've done all this work here, just telling myself that you've trained hard this year, you've put this X amount of much work into it, and all that work is done, and now giving yourself belief that you're ready to go then the next day. That's something that I would do.
That's exactly what Michael Johnson said, right? He says, if you're on the start line in the blocks and you know that you've worked hard in every session possible and you've done everything you can possibly do to lead you up to being the optimum point at this very moment, then how can someone beat you? Because he had that much belief in himself, that much belief in his physical ability and what he's done in the process, that how can somebody beat you?
It's that, I guess it's that we've spoken about before, it's that connection to, this is what I've done, this is who I am, and I'm just going to unlock that by going back and reading everything. I think it's a great idea to be able to trust what the work you've put in and see it visibly, because obviously it's different. It's like a reminder physically right there of what you've done. And I think a lot of us will go, oh yeah, I've done this or that, and a lot of the time maybe we forget to reflect on what we've achieved and what we've done. And I think by doing that in a training way, it's a great way to connect straight to that confidence, that trust in yourself. This is what I've done, this is who I am.
And it's about backing yourself as well, because at the end of the day, if you don't believe in yourself, who else is going to believe in you?
Exactly. So true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to me about the Olympics.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's just an absolute dream come true, I suppose. As I said, ups and downs. Even that year, there was ups and downs. So we had a qualification event in Poland, which was 1st of May. So trying to get ready for that, and it was basically do or die. If we didn't qualify on that night in Poland, which is to come top 8 in the world at the World Relays, we most likely would not have made the Olympics. So you going in that night we had to qualify. So the amount of pressure on that night was incredible. You know, I was happy to take that.
Could you sleep the night before?
Look, as I said, yeah, I might have got the book out, treat it as any other race, and went in. I was starting on first leg, so a bit of pressure there to get us off to a good start. And when we came fourth overall, which was probably beyond anyone's expectations, and we just snapped your hand off at 8 to qualify for the Olympics. But a lot of people then forgot about that was only May, so the Olympics are in July. So the selection is the end of June. So when the team has qualified for the Olympics,
but the spots are open for grabs.
The spots are open, so everyone is saying, "Oh, O'Donnell is going to the Olympics," and at home they didn't really understand that the team had qualified. I hadn't qualified, so the next 2 months was very tough to deal with. Like when everyone is saying, "Oh, you're going? Are you looking forward to Japan?" and all this, and
can't get carried away.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Someone is sitting at home. Someone was watching me in Poland, and they're saying, "I'm going to take this guy's spot." So you had all that to deal with for the next couple of months, and thankfully it all worked out well. Stayed on, try to just, as I said, belief in my training program when I'm going to peak at the right time. My fastest race was the race before the Olympics, and then my fastest race was actually in the Olympics in the relay split. So it's just about trying to believe in your training that I'm going to run that race and maybe peak at the right time. And then when you got there, it was another dream come true, and we kind of treated it the same as Poland, whereas if we can make the final, it's going to be probably another miracle. No one gave us a chance again, and we got through. We made the final. For such a small country, it was a pretty big achievement. And then just seeing the faces at home. Obviously there was no one in the crowd, and people were asking, "Are you feeling any support at all?" But I really did get behind it. A lot of people will. Some athletes might switch off their phones completely. Some athletes will be on their phones all the time, seeing all the messages. I'm probably in between both, so I was able to read the messages while also making sure that I don't get too sucked into what was happening at home, and it certainly provided a lot of inspiration. And then on the way back home, it was just pretty crazy seeing this.
That was mental.
Yeah,
it was like the Diamond Jubilee of this guy coming back. You've seen people knocking pans outside their homes.
No way.
This open top car with you going like this.
But people are coming up to him. They're just like, there was another girl from the same village in swimming who also made the final. And people are just saying that you two guys just performed and you actually made a difference to our summers. We're stuck in lockdown. I was just like, that kind of take me aback, that just us performing whatever happened to perform well on the day, that actually made a difference to people's lives. And definitely I'm like a different athlete since then, just trying to inspire, because I've seen what can happen and how you can inspire people. Now that's kind of the way I go about things, is I try and inspire the next generation, who can be the next Olympian from my town. We were the first two, so who can be the next ones after us, and just making people happy at home and family as well.
How does that sit up below or above in regards to your personal achievement? in regards to what the effect you can have on obviously on the town, on the country, everything.
Yeah, so medals, records, whatever is one thing. As an individual athlete, that's what you always aspire to do, run your PBs, improve your CV as best you can, but inspiring the others is something that I've looked to do. And as I said, after the summer, I didn't really expect the reaction at home, to be fair, is usually very good, but this summer was another level. And just since then, that's certainly, people ask me kind of maybe why are you doing all this hard training, why are you dedicating this, that, why are you dedicating your life? Well, I'm also doing it for other people as well, so I don't feel that I'm alone or going into training. It's an individual sport, but I don't feel like I'm going into training every day just doing it for me. So I get a little boost from that, to be honest, as well.
Why did you start, and for both of you, why did you start running, and what drove you to be this good? What drove you to create the dreams of making the Olympic finals and then going out and trying to achieve that?
I suppose I started just being on the football pitch. We all played football at school, break time, whatever, and then I got pretty fast, got playing at a decent enough level for my age, and they just said to join the athletics club for some extra sprint training so I could maximise my strength on the pitch. I had no intention at all of doing races, and eventually I was coaxed into doing 1 or 2 local races and they started to get better and better, and got to a level then when I was on the Irish underage team. And for me, I was still always a big football fan, and it's still probably my favourite sport to watch, but it was when you're on the national team, it was just difficult to say I'm going to stop running now. So I said I'd give it 1 year, and I just never looked back. And year on year you always set goals, and that's just where I ended up, was setting my goals higher every year. And eventually got to the Olympics. It's always a dream as a kid, but then when you get there, you're getting closer, then you start writing that this is a realistic goal and I want to make this happen. And just from a young age, I suppose I was happy just to dedicate myself, or dedicate my life to football, football, and then it became running. So a lot of my friends who were equally as talented as I was, they didn't go down the same route of dedicating their lives. I would have missed out on a lot of parties, unfortunately, when I was younger. I didn't probably... No, I got along very well with my classmates, to be fair, but I would have missed the occasions, I suppose, outside of school. And they're happy to go down that route. I'm happy to go down the route of where I've ended up, and I've no hard feelings against them for making the change, making the decision that they made, because that's what's going to benefit them. There's no point in them missing out on all the parties, whatever, just for some sport, and then they're feeling bad. Whereas I don't feel that way. I was happy to make that decision, and I'm happy that my friends were able to go down the route they are, and they're equally as happy as I am.
Why did you start running?
That's interesting. Like, I can relate to a lot of what Chris said. I think when you're young, you get into sport for a myriad of ways, and being good at something is probably the most likely cause. Like, I played football when I was younger as well. I was quick. You just go down to it. And for me, I kind of fell into athletics quite fortunately. Someone who I used to play football with and was friends with when I was younger, they went to the local athletics club themselves, and then they wanted to do an open meeting, but they didn't want to do it alone. So they asked me to come along with them. So I'd never been to a track before, and then I just rocked up, wearing my football kit pretty much, entered the 100 metres, the long jump and the 800. You don't have to ask how the 800 went. That was a rough one. And I did quite well. And then at that competition, the age group coach for the club asked me to come down and race the next weekend. So I did. And then from then, it kind of just went up from there. But for me, when I was younger, the thing and even up until when I kind of readjusted where I was at with the sport recently, it was like what kept me in it and what kept me going in it was the social benefits. And for me, regardless of how good I was at a younger age, because I probably had my best years when I was younger, when I was at my best, that was driven by the social benefits and what comes with meeting new people and spending time around people. And the good thing about athletics is that you make friends with people from so many different cultures, backgrounds, countries, events, like you name it. And that opportunity of being good when you're younger meant the better you were, the more competitions you could go to, and the more kind of you could travel and like you get to spend time with these people that you only see once or twice or 3 times a year, but at these competitions. And then kind of up until recently, where I realised that for me the sport, or the reasons why I was doing the sport, weren't quite right, and I was doing it for the wrong reasons, to fulfil kind of areas elsewhere. And the reasons why I started the sport to the reasons why I carried on the sport, I think are different. And I think it's so important as an athlete or a sports person or anyone with a passion to know why they're doing it, and to keep in touch with why they're doing it. And I don't know if this is the same for you, but like the reason why you do it, you need to keep in touch with that, because as soon as you start to lose that, then what's the point? Because if you try and readjust it to do sport or to do your passion for other reasons, to kind of fulfill expectations from someone else, or just for the clout or whatnot, then what's the point? And it's like, I'm a kind of a firm believer in that, like, everything happens for a reason, but you kind of have to put yourself in the position to make it happen. You have to make your own luck. And for me, kind of not fulfilling the potential that I felt like I had on the track has kind of led me to readjust my purpose within sport and come up with ways that I can benefit other people. And like Chris was saying about the buzz you get from helping other people, that often outweighs any high you get from doing it for yourself, because you're actually making a difference. And it's like, yeah, you're making a difference to yourself internally, but that's just boosting your ego. And if you can do something that's going to benefit other people, it's going to make others smile, or get them involved in sport, or stay in the sport, then that means so much more.
It's like, I say it's probably too often on here, but it's like, why selfishness to help other people? It makes you feel happy, and there's like a selfishness to it, but it obviously
100%.
helps everyone at the same time. It's a cool little saying. Do you resonate with that, Chris?
Yeah, it is best of both worlds. And you did mention, I suppose it's a quote as well, that don't forget why you started.
100%.
Like, that's literally, and that could be from a performance perspective as well. If you're in the middle of a really hard training session, you're feeling a bit tired, I can't be bothered to do this last rep, I could take it easy maybe on this last rep, but
3 threes off 10 of the grass sessions we used to do.
Many of those. And then you're saying, there's a little voice in your head saying, let's just, we don't want to be dead after this, let's take it easy. But then you say, right, why did I start this? Do I want to win the medal at the end of the season? And then that's from a performance perspective that can really motivate you. And as well as you said, from the other side of things, don't forget why you started either as well.
You've obviously, like you said, you went through a lot of pressure in that time trying to hold on to that spot in the team. With the amount of sacrifices you made, with your dreams being so close, knowing why you're there, why you're trying to do this, and having got the team, what are the emotions like in that 2-month period? I think that's really interesting. Of you coming, so obviously you got the qualifying, you were one of the athletes to get into the qualifying and to tick that box. So did you feel like, I've got to hold on to this, this is my right, this is this is what I deserve? Was there fear around that? Was there like almost not possessiveness, but like this is mine? And how did that balance of like all the sacrifices you made and the pressure that, again, it's a scary word, I mean, like everyone's different, but was there that there? How did you deal with all those emotions?
I suppose there was a lot of emotions as well. You try not to try to be on the positive side of things and just say, I need to get better, rather than if I stay the way I am, then there's a good chance that someone can surpass me. So I needed to try to get better and better, and I just used the next 2 months to go into training with the same mindset that the team is qualified, but I still need to become a better athlete. And that's why I started out at the start of the year. I started training in September. I want to be in my best shape June, July, and that was only May, so I knew that I still had 2 months of work to be done. And I just try to be as I said, become a better athlete really, and try not to let the fear and worry that someone could be knocking on your door or something like that. So in the end, the team, only 2 of us from Poland actually ran in Tokyo.
Okay.
So, and both the substitutes were different as well, so there was a lot of shake up in the team, and it was, for me, it was just a case of just trying to improve myself every day, because that's what I do anyway. So to try and complicate things, it would have made matters worse, I think.
Why do you have that need to get better?
Just as an athlete, that's what we do every day. Like, your goals always shift. So I ran this time, great PB, then you're saying, right, we need to actually run faster again, and you know, you might break one record, and then you're saying, right, this record needs to be better again. You know, people ask, I suppose in Tokyo, Karsten Warholm's record was probably the highlight of the whole games, and people are saying to Karsten, what can you do more? And for him, it's just to keep winning, to keep getting better, and to try and create a legacy. You know, so there always is something to go for.
Do you struggle ever with, like, and obviously we talk about falling out of love with it, was there ever like a need to succeed, or a need, like many needs in that place for you?
100%. I think we've spoken so many times before as athletes that the identity that comes with doing something often takes over, and it's easy to let it take over because you become so engrossed with it. And I think with me kind of falling out of love with it when I did, it was essentially that misalignment of the things that mattered. Like my life and my sport balance was completely out of sync, and it affected me in every way possible, which ultimately led me to stopping the sport that I'd loved and that I'd spent literally my last 10 years obsessing over. Like I'd literally come home from school and spend hours looking at rankings of people that weren't even relevant to me at all. And it's like, how can you fill that void? But like I've said, if you can fill that void with something that you care about and that is going to benefit other people, and that for me is in the same field, is in the same industry, and is in the same sport, then you can ultimately live your life in athletics, not as an athlete, but through something that's more than an athlete. And like, to me, I want to make the most of me as a person and the differences that I can make as me as a person, as Joe, rather than as an athlete that I used to be. Because like with everything that we're trying to do, it's like, how can you make the most difference to yourself as a person? Because if you don't put yourself first, then you're not going to help anyone. And you have to be selfish, as we've said, but you can make lives of other people better. And if you can find the way of doing that ticks as many boxes as possible, then that's fantastic, because you're never going to tick every box, are you? Like, as an athlete, it's impossible to be, like, you can't really have a perfect race, because there's always something that could have been 1% better. And until you realise that in life and in sport, you're always going to be on the back foot.
Is there any consequences to that obsessiveness that you had and that void that you were trying to fill?
Oh, entirely. Like, the obsessiveness of something, if you let it take over, then it's undoubtedly going to affect you and other people in so many ways. And the sooner you realise that, the better. I've always kind of been one to believe that if something's wrong, there's kind of 3 steps. There's acknowledging it's wrong, and then there's talking about it to get it out there, and then there's acting upon it. And as soon as you've done those things, you can potentially fix most things if you do it the right way. And with that in mind, and like from a sporting consequence, there's always ways around things, but everyone's different. And that's where kind of copying other things that other people have done, or taking advice from other people, it's always kind of tricky, because it's always different for each person to the next. And if you try something, put your all into something, and it doesn't work, then that could potentially be more harm than good. So it's interesting. Did
you, when you were going through those steps of obviously be aware, talk about it, then act upon it, did that process come into play with the identity shift of being an athlete to how can I find other purposes in this world? Definitely.
Call
upon it.
It's really difficult to do that, but we're all strong enough to do that. It's just about kind of unlocking within you the things that you already have to do that. And talking about things is so difficult. And in sport especially, you have to kind of put your pride aside to talk about things that are going to benefit you and others, or to make your life or your journey smoother going forward. But you have to do that. You have to put your pride aside, like I said, and it's going to benefit you in so many ways if you can do that. But as athletes, we see it as weakness, and that stigma that's shifting slightly with mental health and sport and in life in general, that the sooner we can shift that, the sooner we can improve on that, make it normalized just by talking about it and acknowledging it and then acting upon it. That if everyone did that, would make sport a much healthier environment to be in and to witness, and for children to see that as a normal thing, rather than when we were growing up, you'd see there was nothing on mental health.
No examples.
There was everything on perfection. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. You have to work yourself into the ground. And then once you've done that and you get to our age, you go, oh, what now?
Yeah.
Like, that hasn't worked. I'm not happy. I'm not like Olympic champion potentially, you might be, but for that 0.001%, it hasn't worked. Then what?
It's come up a few times on the show in that some of the guests we've had is you've got these incredible athletes who are super dedicated, but at the same time just remembering that they're just normal people. And I think, yes, maybe some people's, like we spoke about it with Morgan, is that you want to reconnect that balance, and sometimes that balance between human and athlete, that connection between the two, we lose, and there's so many blocks in them that we have to really work on reconnecting that, whether that be through meditation, yoga, whatever, or writing and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's also this strong thing of just being a normal person and doing normal things, and not having to improve that normal person, just them being just a normal person that can enjoy watching TV. Again, it probably won't be eating any fast food for you, but whatever that may be. And I think that sometimes we forget, the public outside forget. But most importantly, what this is about is that we forget with ourselves, in that we forget we're just a normal person because we get so attached to, this is who I am, this is what I have to do. Yeah. Have you ever struggled with the identity of being an elite athlete and like, this is the expectation I have to do, this is who I am?
For me, I think you find out a lot after your defeats or your biggest losses. So it's all great getting all these messages after you do well. Fantastic. Appreciate every one of them. But I kind of look at who messages me after I don't do well, potentially. Stuff like that. And
how do you deal when things don't go well?
So I won 3 national titles in a row in 3 years until last year. I was second, just beat on the line this summer. So for me, that was a big loss to take. And I had a race in Switzerland 2 or 3 days after that final planned. So I was going to be staying over in a hotel in Dublin instead of, there was no point in going home, come back for one day. So I stayed over at the hotel. It's the Sunday, it was the Saturday night. And I was going to fly to Switzerland on the Monday. Yeah. So it meant I had that whole Sunday to myself, stuck in a hotel room after I had probably the biggest loss, the most disappointing loss, to be honest.
From Irish national champion 3 years in a row
to then come in second. So I was going to be in a hotel room all that day myself. My family who came to watch the race, they went home. And they called me then that night, like, right, what are you going to do tomorrow? And I was like, well, a normal high performance athlete, I might watch the race back 50 times, let's analyse where it went wrong for the next time. But then came the suggestion that, do you want us actually to come back up and see you tomorrow, which would be a 3-hour journey. I was like, you've got better things to be doing. But actually, my mum and my sister came up, and along with my uncle and my cousin, and I didn't even talk about the race. We went out, it was a lovely day, just went to a seaside town, had a meal, walked around in the sun, literally took her mind off everything, came back to the hotel late that evening, straight to bed. Next morning got a flight to Switzerland, I ran personal best.
Wow.
And it was just that taking the mind off it, whereas I think if I had stuck myself in that hotel room making notes, analysing my race, whatever, I would have just my mind would have blown. So just getting out there, in this case was my family, or it could be your friends, someone close to just take your mind off it. And for me, it just done me the world of good, really refreshed me. And as I said, went into the next race with a fresh mind and ran the fastest race of my life then after, what was the most disappointing race of my life.
Great example. I think it's a perfect example of the support we have around us. Joe, you're obviously an expert in athlete support. Talk to me about how important that is, and obviously you can bring in the ideas of the athlete place. Sure. and how that works.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was an athlete myself. I competed to quite a decent level when I was younger, But that really isn't, like, now I look back at it, it doesn't matter how good I was. It's kind of about what you do to benefit.
How you approach it.
Yeah, exactly. And the kind of the approach I'm taking at the moment is that, like, using my own experiences and everything I've done in the sport to benefit other people and to share that kind of peer-to-peer support and peer-to-peer guidance, because like Chris was saying, like everyone else who's been an athlete, is you're going through similar things that someone else is going through as a person or as an athlete. But as an athlete, you've got extra baggage because you've got all the stresses that come with being an athlete, as well as being a human.
Into like
exactly,
a 40-year career.
100%. It's like trying to
put
put two things into one, and it just doesn't happen. It kind of just moves around. And my own experiences, when I was going through my darkest times, I felt like there wasn't a support network in place for me because myself blocked everything out. I thought that not talking about these things was going to help. I thought that not speaking to my peers, who I thought at the time weren't going through this, so they wouldn't understand. And that was not the case, because all it would have taken for me would be to listen to my own advice. I'd acknowledge something was wrong, but I didn't talk to a soul about it.
Yeah.
I didn't talk to someone who knows what it feels like to be an athlete. And I didn't feel like there was a platform or a space to find that peer-to-peer support where the like-minded people who are going through exactly the same things as you can talk about these things or to share these things. So I literally...
Like everyone has families like Chris's.
Exactly, that's the thing.
Do something
but
like that in that moment.
Everyone needs to find what works for them. They need to find that as soon as they can, physically. And like, the sooner you find that, the better things are going to be, because you need people around you who support you through the highs, who keep you grounded and don't let you run away with things, and also pick you up when things go badly, because they will. Sport, things are always going to go wrong at some point. And if you haven't got those sport kind of support networks or people in place or kind of platforms available to share that like-minded experiences, or to have the information in place that is going to help people from that point of view, then it's a missing opportunity, isn't it? And with what I created with the Athlete Place, it was essentially using peer-to-peer support and peer-to-peer guidance to help smoothen the journey of being an athlete in track and field and athletics, because as we know, it's so turbulent. One day you could go from becoming second at your national champs, 2 days later you won a PB. It's not always like that.
It's a roller coaster.
And it's a complete roller coaster, but it's how you deal with that roller coaster. And for me, it got to that point where I started this focusing on mental health and athletics, but it got to that point where I realised that there is so much more to well-being as athletes than just mental health, and that the support and guidance more often than not comes from your parents. And the approach I'm taking with it all is that parental support and guidance, more often than not, 98-99% of the time as a person or as an athlete, your parents are the number one supporters that you have. But if these parents and these people around you aren't getting the correct guidance and support to support you as an athlete, then how can they support you effectively? And how can they eliminate the things that are going to be counterproductive in your development as a person and as an athlete? But also essentially looking at the other benefits. A sport such as athletics, there's not much money in it. Or there is, but it's not distributed properly. And therefore the spectatorship and the amount of fans that go to competitions is sometimes questionable. And if you can target the parents and to kind of get them interested and engaged but correctly from a young age, then that can have massive benefits on the sport in itself. And this is applicable to any sport, because more often than not, if you're competing, your parents are going to be there watching. We look at the sidelines at a sports event, it's mostly parents or relatives, because that's why they're there. And then how can you best utilise that to benefit the sport? How can you best use peer-to-peer support from people and collaboration within it
who understand it,
who get exactly how you feel and why you're doing it to make the biggest difference? And that's essentially our goal, is to make the most of peer-to-peer support and guidance, like-minded individuals who are doing it for the same reason, and actually create something unique that's going to make a difference for people like ourselves.
Well, I think that that's an example of what Chris just said he needed in that moment, that obviously your family recognised and supported you there.
Yeah.
And you're creating that in a platform through other people that will understand it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's certainly something that would have happened over the years. You know, if I was in my first year doing the sport, I don't think that would have happened. They wouldn't have understood what I was going through. Whereas I was probably, what am I now, 7-8 years of taking the sport seriously. My parents have gradually, at the start, you know, I used to slag them off a bit that they didn't have a clue or whatever. And now that they are educated in the sport over time, and I do wish that we had something like the Athlete Place when I was a young athlete. I think if you look at any international schools team, you know, take out your old program from your door, look at the names, I'd say 80-90% are not even in the sport anymore. And a lot of that is down to lack of support. You know, or my parents are saying, oh, why is my Bobby not winning this race by a mile or whatever, and then they lose interest. Whereas there's a much bigger picture here in the education that thankfully I was able to have that support, and that came as education over time and my years through the sport, through my ups and downs.
For someone who seems so, again, obsessive, dedicated, ready to sacrifice anything, you seem almost as a kindness to yourself, which comes across, which is quite interesting, because we normally expect that to be very harsh on ourselves, and I for one can be very hard on myself in those moments and those bad days. But that kindness to yourself, even though you're working so hard towards a goal, it's a kindness to know that this is my body, this is what I know about my body, I'm in touch with it, again I'm working with it to create the outcome that I want. And I think that's where really the culture right now is do. You have to work hard, you have to do all this, you have to sacrifice everything, dedicate, you can't do anything but that. And then there's this separate culture of looking after yourself, and the two never really fit and never really go well. But it's that idea that if you can still push yourself but also just trust that you're doing the best you can and that it will go your way whether it does or not, or that you can do whatever you can to put yourself in that peak position, or look at the stats, know your body to get into that place, and try and connect the two of being kind to yourself, believing that this is okay, and then that matching that with the performance. I think it's really interesting, because I think we often as athletes, we've got pushing our bodies to the limit, and then we connect that with pushing our minds to the limit. You have to be achieving this, you have to be doing that, and we're very hard on ourselves. And I think there's a lot of kindness that, and maybe credit you give yourself in these moments. Yeah,
so I think people probably think an athlete like this, a dedicated athlete, you know, there's probably is a misconception that they think they just go home and are overly obsessive and they don't actually think about themselves. Whereas, you know more than anyone else, as a happy athlete, as a fast athlete.
100%. But that can be related to people as well. Like, it's easy to say happy athletes successful or whatnot, but if you're happy, you're going to perform better in life. And that's about kind of distinguishing the difference between the athlete and the human, whereby we know that there's two different personas between the two, and if they kind of get too tangled up, then that's when problems start to arise. And it's that if you're performing well on the track, you're more likely to perform well in other areas of your life, because the way you carry yourself, the way you interact with other people, and the way you do things outside of your sport are done in such a much more kind of pure way. You're happier, you carry yourself better, as I've said, and it's like everyone can see that. Everyone can feel the benefits of you being happy. But if you're not putting yourself first to ensure your happiness, then other people are going to struggle as well around you. You won't want people around you, will you?
No. Stereotype to bed of this culture, and yet it still works. Do we think, or what do we think comes first, happiness or growth? Because you said obviously a happy athlete makes a fast athlete. So would you still back that in a performance setting? Yeah,
personally I think they come hand in hand. With growth comes happiness more often than not. If you seem to be progressing the way you want to be progressing, that's probably going to make you quite happy. Whereas with happiness, it's easier to grow. Whereas I think if you're happy, you carry yourself right, you've got that confidence, you've got that inner fire and the buzz in a sporting context. If you turn up to the track happy, you're much more likely to perform well. You're much more likely to be focused on what you need to focus on. Your head's clearer, you haven't got any demons or black clouds bringing you down. And I think the way in which you can kind of think about which one comes first, it's difficult because they could both come first, but they'd both have one impact on another. Whereas if you look at it and try and have them both aligned, moving forward at the same time whilst you're happy, that's ultimately going to have more of a benefit than prioritising one or the other, in my opinion, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, to be honest. And if you don't enjoy what you do either, and if you go in every day thinking that something's a chore, for me, you're not going to reach your full potential. So I do think you have to enjoy it. But as you said, when you see the growth, so that might be over a number of years, then you're going to enjoy it and you see, right, this is what I've started it. So for me, yeah, while the training can be very tough at times, you still have to say that I enjoy what I do. It's, what else would I be doing, I suppose. And just say, yeah, I've made this decision and I'm happy I made this decision. I don't have any regrets that I'm an athlete or I'm working somewhere else. I'm a doctor, I made this decision. If you enjoy what you do, then for me, you're going to see your progress faster.
Yeah.
Have you ever doubted your decision?
I've never doubted my decision, to be honest, no. And as I said to my friends who I grew up who didn't make the decision that I've made, they're happy, they haven't doubted their decision, and I'm more than happy of what they do. We shared dressing rooms together over the years, and fortunately we don't have that banter anymore, but they're happy, I'm happy, and they're happy for me, I'm happy for them. So for me, there's no regrets.
Yeah, I think it's important as well to realise that as deep as it is to get so fixated on success, no one's making you do anything. Like at the end of the day, if you don't want to do it, who's going to stop you? And if you're the person that gets yourself out of bed or to work or to just do something, and in this context with sport, it's that you're the one that goes to the track or to the gym, and the expectations that you put on yourselves are what matters, because who cares what other people think? Like, yeah, you've got to listen to certain people here and there and follow rules and stuff like that, but like, if you don't want to do it, then don't do it, because it doesn't matter. It's not that deep. And one of the things for me was that led me to kind of making the decisions that I made with the sport was that there's more to life than running around in circles. There is, but there's also a lot to say about doing the things that you love doing as well as running around in circles. There shouldn't be, I have to do this, therefore I can't do all of this. That's not how it works. And it's like, for Chris, it could be going to football matches, spending time with friends, going to the gym, training, and all of these things intertwine, but with balance and the way in which you want it to work. Whereas if somebody else is telling you to do something, you don't want to do it. No one likes being told what to do. But if it's you telling yourself to do something, you're way more likely to do it, and you're way more likely to do it with a smile on your face and to a much better performance.
Well, I think it goes back to the question I said about the needs. It's like, what do you want or what do you need? And I think it's about using the wants. If you want to train hard, go for it. But it's being careful not to make things needs.
Yeah.
And even though, yes, this is part of your performance, but it's a way of going back to your enjoyment through simply approaching it with a different perspective. Or I want to push myself to this today, or actually, yeah, I pushed myself this much, I want to take a break. And it's staying away from this obsessive needs of this is what I have to do, because we all know there's, obviously we're not devaluing hard work here, we all know that that's what you need, using the needs, but you do need it to be successful, but you also want to work that hard to be successful in the first place. So I think there's also that thing of maybe even catching yourself with how many needs you use and start trying to go back to what you want, and that's probably even a quick way to go back to that. Do you have any questions for each other on these topics?
Like yours, I remember you obviously started the sport, and something I really admire is that when you then stopped the sport, but you came back, you gave it another go. It's like, what was your reason so you'd stopped the sport and you said, right, I'm actually going to give this another go. So what was your reason to say? Was it to find out what am I missing, or what was that reason? Because I really admired that, and then you stuck by it and you went back and you said, no, this actually isn't isn't what I want to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. For those of you who don't know, like Chris and I have known each other since we were first in halls at university. And then when you changed group after a year, he joined the group that I was in. So we trained together for 2.5 years. And then I stopped. I kind of had that misalignment of balance and priorities, and I fell out of love with the sport. It felt like a 9-to-5 job that I wasn't getting paid a penny for. I didn't want to go. And the goals that I'd set were totally out of sync with the other priorities in life as well. And I then stopped. I left the group. Ironically, I ran 2 PBs in my last ever competition, and then literally like a week and a half later, I called it quits, and realised that like my priorities are completely wrong. I was in the shape of my life. Like I was undoubtedly going to run well that year, but it didn't bother me in the slightest because I wasn't happy. And then taking 10 months off, so I left my group and quit the sport in February 2020. So it was a month before COVID started. So the timing for me was perfect. But even so, like fast forward 10 months, people are starting to compete again. The season's kicking off in like August time. But I was sat home watching, and I didn't miss it one bit. I didn't feel any form of jealousy about people competing out there, and I was sat at home eating Doritos on the sofa. I loved it. And then coming back, I started thinking there are ways that I can get back into the sport that aren't about me. I got back into the sport to benefit other people by starting training with one of my good friends who was trying to get to the Olympics that next year. I started training again so that I could run side by side with her, pacing her, doing the hardest sessions you could think of on the track and in the gym, making myself sick, all for somebody else. And it's not often you can find ways in which you put other people before you. But for me, finding that I didn't care about myself from an athletics point of view anymore, but I could still see value in me doing the sport. And I could still see that by helping other people, the joy I got from seeing her running for England in the 4x4 was unbelievable. Like literally I was tearing up watching her race because of all the hard work that we'd gone through that winter. For what? For me, I didn't get anything out of it apart from the love that I saw in helping somebody else achieve their goals. And then it kind of got to me that then unfortunately the people I was training with, they moved down south again. And then I thought, well, I'm in the sport again, might as well carry on. Then I had no intention of competing. I wanted to train to help other people. But then fast forward, I got ill, and then I wasn't missing the sport. But I wasn't missing the sport because I got back into the sport for the wrong reasons. I'd got back into the sport for the social benefits only, rather than the inner desire that made me want to do all these things. Someone asked me when we were doing a dirty split 600 session, like, everyone was throwing up at the track. I had a smile on my face. Somebody asked me, why are you doing this? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know why I was doing it, but I enjoyed every second of it. And then, why did I stop again? I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I could feel like I was getting the social benefits with the people that I wanted to spend time around without having to put myself through this hell, which is the 400 metre hurdles. And the reason why I got back into it was because I loved it. But the reason why I kept doing it was because I thought I could help other people. And then I thought, how can I help people the most? And by me being a training partner to somebody else, yeah, I can help them. But I could help people on a much wider scale if I take a step back from actually doing it, invest that time and effort, don't burn the candle at both ends, which is something that everyone in life needs to think about. How can I benefit the most people in a way that's authentically me? The passions I care about and the things I'm good at, and then how can I mix them all together to benefit more than one person? And that's kind of like why I got back into the sport. But now it changed. I had to change. You had to pivot. We always do in life, don't we? And in sport you have to kind of have the balls to think, I need to change something, this isn't right, and just move forward and accept that change is good.
I think your authenticity and strength in that, because I know in myself and a few other people in and out of professional football, there's a lot of shame and guilt because we get worried and attached to who we were or who we thought where we were going to go, and all these different identities and ideas we had around that. I think your ability to put other people in front of that and focus on the feelings you get from supporting them or from not making it about you, I think within that, the generosity to do that is pretty inspiring. And I think people who are going through those transitions of looking at themselves, debating why they're doing it, thinking of taking a break or coming back into it, to just believe in yourself in that way and be strong in what you want to do, and try not to get too tied up in how other people see you or what's attached to who you think you are.
Definitely.
And I think you've dealt with that clearly pretty specially.
Yeah, I think being more present it's only gonna benefit you in more ways than not. And it's the fact that you can always come back to something. It's very rarely something, if you don't do it now, it's completely gone forever.
Well, look at the Australian Open tennis player.
Exactly.
Number 1 in the world, wins Australian Open.
Yeah.
Is it Ash Barty, I think?
Ash Barty, yeah.
And then decides to stop.
She had 25 or something.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone, the culture is like, hold up, why aren't you now going to the next thing?
Yeah.
Why aren't you now going to be the greatest ever?
Why should she? It's her life. She can do what she wants to do. If she feels like she's achieved everything she wants to do, perfect.
It's pretty, it's different, and you clearly see that she had the freedom to make that decision and not get caught into the culture of you can't take 6 months off, or
100%.
you can't take a year off, or you can't even take, what's crazy is you go back to, you were saying about training, you can't even take 2 days off. It's the culture in our minds to think that we can't do that. And it's actually like, what's best for me, for my mind, for my body. And that's the source of like, how are you going to enjoy your life?
Yeah, exactly. I've got a really, like, for you, right, you're so switched on, you're achieving things year on year out, but if you were to look back and talk to yourself on day one of the sport, what advice would you give to that young Chris, and the changes potentially like that you give to them?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. Like, usually my advice to young athletes is I tell them to stick by it, because I've seen, like, if you get the enjoyment out of it, like, to stick by it. So I'll tell myself that in those tough times, that there's going to be some really tough times along the way. You're going to need your support network. For me, that was the most important thing. And if you have the support network, it's easier to stick by it, and it's easier to find that enjoyment out of it. So, like, I would certainly, tell myself that there's going to be days where it's not all going to be plain sailing. When you're a young boy, you think, I'm going to be captain of Man United, I'm going to be the fastest runner in the world, and everything's going to be great. But as I said, there's going to be defeats along the way. There's going to be, a lot of disruptions, injuries that people have to deal with. We forget about that as well. And I just tell myself that build your support network, which I didn't have when I was younger, which I'm eventually, as I said, I'm happy enough that I do now. I would tell myself, to have that support around you and just enjoy what you're doing, for sure.
Would you have wanted younger Chris to open up sooner about, or trying to explain it more to the people around you? Is that how you would have built it sooner? Or like, because I remember when you're under 16 athlete and you're running against like these guys, and you're like, how on earth am I ever actually going to beat him? And you don't know at what stage of the career he's at, so you need to tell yourself at that age that if you're in this for the long run, that you can come good, and he might be beating you at under 16 level, but in reality, in a few years time, you don't know at what stage of progression that he's at. So that's certainly what I do. Cool. If there's anything, I was gonna kind of build on your question, if there's one change you could make right now to anything, and there'll be no consequences, no side effects, this would be one change you'd install in your life straight away, what would you change?
What would I change? It's a very good question, because as an athlete you always think what I'm doing is perfect.
Exactly.
So what will we change? Well, we're going to have to say, in that case, does it mean I'm doing something wrong? So
we don't want to ever ask ourselves that.
We never want to ask ourselves that.
You don't want to dent the ego.
Exactly, it's in the way, right?
Yeah.
I would say to actually open up a bit more about, like, I always try and get other people to, I see someone else maybe down, I try and put my arm around their shoulder, and in some cases I'm becoming like a rescuer to some people, and I do that a bit overboard where I don't actually think about myself in this case. Is that maybe if I'm having a bad day, like who do I go to? Sometimes I don't know who that person is. Luckily those days don't come around too often, whereas I feel that there's a few people, you know, who I know that if they're having a bad day, I'm going to be their go-to person. Whereas I don't sometimes wouldn't want to put them under that pressure if I'm having a bad day. Whereas I would say to myself, you have to make that change, feel comfortable with maybe either it doesn't have to be the same person, but use someone that you're able to then. That's for me. Yeah, that's probably one thing that I could do a bit better. But thankfully, I don't have those days as often as some people would who I do kind of look out for. But that's something I could do a bit better. Yeah.
I think that's brilliant. I think that the vulnerability to ask for help is one of the, like, as an athlete, as even, you know, look at the masculinity in football and stuff like that, especially in sport, to open up and ask for help or to be vulnerable in those positions is incredibly important. And I think, it's a brilliant change to make. And I think if you can talk about it and say it now, I think you're already on the ways to being able to talk about it more. And I think that that's something we can all do better and be more vulnerable in that way. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100% agree. 100%. Yeah, it's like I said earlier, the sooner you can acknowledge that something, it's not even if something's wrong. You can acknowledge good things, because if you can acknowledge a good thing, you can tell people about it, and then you can act upon it and use that to help other people. I think it just comes back to the balance again, doesn't it? It's like everything, if it's done right in balance, is a good thing.
We finish every episode with the final question. What makes you more than a runner? What makes you human?
It's the fact that we have bad days as well, that we can lose races as well. So people think you're a runner, you're this machine, you work in that way. So for me, that we go through the emotions as a human being does. You know, people are like, oh, well, these footballers are on 100 grand a week, you know, they don't have any emotions, whereas actually it does affect them as much as anybody else. So for me, that you could be on any amount of money, you could be the world record holder, the greatest athlete of all time, but you still have the same emotions as someone working anywhere else. So for me, that's what certainly makes me human, not just an athlete.
Would you add to anything after you?
I mean, like, looking at it from more of a different point of view, like, I couldn't agree more with what Chris has said. It's about the emotions, but I think being an athlete, you have different purposes than you do, and different kind of goals as you do as a person. And I think athletes themselves get too fixated on external goals and external validations without kind of realizing the internal things. And it's difficult because as a person you don't often think about your goals being external, and they're usually always internal. Whereas with an athlete it's the other way around. And then it's kind of looking about how these things kind of align, where you can actually look at yourself as a person and make and create these kinds of internal goals, such as happiness, fulfillment, being more present, to allow you to then achieve these external goals as people and as athletes, but also then think about the importance of the internal goals that you need as an athlete. The confidence, the self-belief, the vulnerability that is going to come with the ups and downs and how you deal with them. And just using those kinds of crossovers that are present being an athlete and as a person, and using how the things that happen in life and the things that happen to you as an athlete can help one another, how you can use the struggles you face on the track or in the gym or the upsets to then apply those into life as a person. I think those are the things that set athletes apart, because they've experienced things and they've lived and they've felt things.
I think you touched on a really good point, because it's that whole thing of like you said, obviously balancing, but also not forgetting that you are human and that these things are working all together. And I think what we do really well, or what the culture doesn't do really well, is obviously, like we said, is it shuts it off. You don't want to deal with it. You don't open up, all these things like that. But what you're really, I guess, focusing on is importance of feeling it all and being present with it all. And I think that changes that belief, and it disrupts what we know, in that you can't use your human feelings, you can't use your natural emotions to make you a better athlete. And I think that we forget that all these things, they're affecting us all the time. They're affecting your energy, they're affecting the chemicals in your body, they're affecting how your muscles feel. And so if we disregard them in our performance or how we approach the track, then I think it's almost naive to forget these things. And they're there with us all the time. You carry your minds and perspectives every second of the day. You're only performing an hour, 2 hours a day, and that's in training. That's let alone obviously in a race, it's 1 minute, 2 minutes, or however long, depending on what you're doing. And so it's like these things, you carry them with your whole life. And like we've already said, a happy athlete makes a fast athlete. So why are we focused on just being fast and not being happy, when we know that improves performance just as much, if not more?
Yeah. And myself and Joe actually went through a tough period one time in the sport when we lost our coach. So this was a coach who put so much into it every day, and then for him no longer to be able to coach us. So what did we do in that time? We all met up nearly every night. We went to someone else's house, just said exactly what we think, what are we going to do next, how are we feeling, what's the next steps. And I think like we became better friends over that period, in that tough time, than we were before. We still have a group chat, still the same guys in it. We went out for meals, we still meet up for meals together, and it's because it was during this hard time really brought us together. And if we didn't work together as a group during that time, and we could have easily just went our separate ways. Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that,
I'm going to do it by myself. Yeah.
We all met up, we went to each other's house every night, all for however many weeks, and we still meet up as a group. And I think that was just a little story there that was something that I certainly look back on that really helped in a tough time. It helped all of us, that we were all there for each other. We were going through this to lose a coach figure like that, and we put our minds together, and I think that shows you what can be done.
The tough times make you stronger, and if you can use that to develop the right way and bring yourselves, community, close together to do good and to use the bad for good, then it's gonna be good for more than one people.
Feel it all, like use it all, talk about it all.
Sure.
It sounds a pretty good idea to me. Thank you guys for coming on.
Awesome, mate. Loved it.